Glorious Crows. Welcome back to the Ascending Crows podcast. Today is a very, very unique episode, as this is not a formal interview, but rather a gathering of the crows, so to speak, in which we discuss one of our all-time favorite animated series, Avatar: The Last Airbender. So joining us for this conversation is Thomas Billy, Ben Polo, and our producer, Manifesto. And we talk about the meaning of the hero's journey and how this is such a universal spiritual symbol, especially for our generation and all the media we grew up with. And it leads into a conversation of the spiritual and psychological representation that the four elements have in Avatar. The people who wrote this show, this is by no means fanatic love for East Asian martial arts. These people really, really have a deep understanding of East Asian philosophy, the martial arts themselves, and even some esoteric practices that go along with these elements of East Asian culture. So I encourage all fans of Avatar to enjoy this episode, but if you're just simply someone who's interested in the content of our podcast, I think you'll like this conversation as well. So sit back and ascend with the crows.
Ascending Crows Podcast.
So
Avatar: The Last Airbender includes Kung Fu, which is practiced by Jackie Chan.
Oh.
Jackie Chan is named after the hit Post Malone song,
Break it down.
Jackie Chan. Coincidence? I think not.
Let's think about who Jackie Chan really is.
Post Malone.
Post Malone.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen them together?
On a more Dizelle note,
Diesel.
the hero's journey.
Mm.
The hero's journey, but I mean that I think is our generation really grew up on so many different stories of variations of this, right? And that I think it mirrors spiritual practice in a way that we have to leave our comfort zone and encounter the world in order to really grow and develop certain aspects of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we all do that in so many different ways, and that represents our paths. That represents what we feel innately in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
It's a dope story to tell the kids, because of the subject matter.
Well,
You know what I mean?
I just thought of something that's interesting is to the point of our stories as children, as we'll get into, are these very fantastic things, right? They're they're fantastic, right? That's the word. People are shooting fire and energy beams, and they teleport, and they do all sorts of shit. And these plights that they encounter are out of this world. Whereas the hero's journey for like in the American zeitgeist, right? Our folk tales, it was just about going west, right? It was just this is what it's like to just be alive elsewhere in this country. It is to be a hero, right? You have your fucking Tom Sawyer is sort of, but I'm only thinking of real people, so this sounds weird, but Billy the Kid was an outlaw hero, Wyatt Earp, famous sheriff, right? He's just dealing with the real world, right? You couldn't make a hero's journey about just living in the real world now, right?
Well, definitely, I don't think it would have caught our attention for sure.
Right.
I think we would have gotten bored of it too quick to really understand what they were trying to represent.
Mm-hmm. Well, I liked westerns and shit as a kid, you know what I mean? But it had to be set back then, right? It's about a time that isn't around anymore, anyway, right? Whereas I'm talking about kids buying cereals for a penny, right? And it's telling a story about some guy who is apparently doing this right now, 600 miles to the west.
I remember. I don't think I ever imagined myself being the hero story of right now, the present. In my own mind, I don't think I ever imagined scenarios where I was living in the present in any kind of or at least when I think of when I was a kid and I wanted to make stories up or play pretend with anyone, it was never about the here and now.
Right. Well, because we have to create this fanciful narrative, right? We need to create a dystopian future or a mystical bad guy because we don't have that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It would have been almost like a thought of like a waste of imaginative energy. Like, why would I do that? Like, I need to be like I'm like flying in like
Cops and Robbers is just like intricate hide and seek, right? Like instead I'm gonna play Power Rangers. You know, like
it's all imaginative.
So,
and that's third eye.
Let's. I mean, so in terms of Aang's journey, what I mean, this is a little bit early on, but as a culmination of the story, I mean, like, what do you think is his spiritual lesson that he's going through? You know, he seems to be born with so many great qualities, right? He's already such a benevolent, compassionate person. What does he need to work on himself to really develop and be better towards other people? He seems like he's almost born with that
responsibility.
Right. I think for me, a lot of what Aang's journey, the way I look at it, is that Aang is trying to learn how to take on, like Thomas said, the responsibility of being the Avatar. Aang ran away from it all. Now, you know, he also, I think in the beginning, you see a lot of Aang wanting to be a kid. You know, his return to Kyoshi Island to play with the koi, you know, in between all of, you know, even after him, because this is after him figuring out that, you know, the air temples have been destroyed. Right, so he kind of runs away from his responsibility, you know, soon after. And then I think the culmination of it is he's finally he's going to put the world on his back, you know, as all avatars eventually have to do, and fight the Fire Lord. And yeah, it is really that growing into being a responsible person that holds their ground, that is true to their principles. You know, I think that's a lot of Aang's personal hero story.
I think they almost basically directly show that too in the beginning with, you know, some of his flashbacks to his temple life, right? And sort of not you know, fulfilling all of his monastic duties or so it's just running away from the concept. I mean that's sort of the basis of
he's just
the beginning of his story, right?
He's the kid
running away from his Avatar responsibilities.
Well, he's even before he's running away from his Avatar responsibilities, they paint him as the most playful kid. He makes the airball game and all. You know what I mean? Like he's the one that everyone's trying to play with, and so when they take him away from playing, he's really not trying to. He's not trying to do that. And to your point, Sam, it's easy to be nice when you're a kid, right? And I think that's the first thing that Aang realizes, right? Is that it's easy right now. It's easy to have fun. It's easy to do all this shit. And as soon as all the shit that they're telling me is not going to be easy, and I know that because they're telling me now, and they're supposed to tell me when I'm 16. Right. There's a bunch going on that they flesh out later in the show. You know, like in the beginning, it's not made clear that it's so abnormal that he's being told at 12. You know, but there's weight to that, right? Like there's and this is what makes the show so good is there's a cultural understanding going on, right? Like the nations are so united and the world is such at peace that, like, you know, the Avatar is a thing. People know that the Avatar gets told at 16. So when he's told at 12, he knows something's up. He's immediately just like, oh shit, I'm not going to get to be a kid. And you know, this is a very long-winded way of me saying it's easy to be a kid. Yeah. And it's easy to be nice when you're a kid. It's easy to be nice when you don't have power over people and a bunch of responsibility. And as soon as he starts to get power, as soon as he learns firebending, right, the first thing he starts doing is going down that path. I'm like, wait a second, I can burn motherfuckers.
He recoils from it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's he definitely and it's just because he doesn't that state of mind is just not anything he's accustomed to or anything he's felt. So.
And it's reactive, right? It's very reactive to this being 100 years late. Right. It's like, this is how I have to do it because this is the fastest way to it.
I love that scene too because I mean he accidentally hurts Katara, right? The person he loves. And I feel like these qualities, I mean, really are are pretty metaphorical to when you have this outburst of fire, you can accidentally hurt the people you love with this outburst of energy you have, whether it be actually physical or emotional or psychological, something like that.
Right. Verbal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, continuing down, this is a good segue for this. I really love how in Avatar, there's such a great array of characters. That's why this show is so popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, people love to relate to the characters. They see bits of them. They're so relatable. They're so human. So where do you guys sort of resonate? What do you think? What qualities do you think the elements represent? In terms of the spectrum of the human psyche, really.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's the obvious ones, right? There's like fire as rage and fury, and I think what the show does a good job of, as we were just talking about before we started recording, is the idea that there's more to passion than rage and fury, and where the show starts you with the Fire Nation as a representation of fire is that's all that they have, is anger and rage and fury and hate. And whereas Iroh and the firebenders of old are like, no, there's more to passion. There's more to what fuels us than rage, anger, and hate and everything else. Water, I think, right, it's the clear, we go with the flow kind of deal. And I think the show does a really cool job of representing that by them being at the poles, in that, even...
So water can be anywhere.
Well, it can be anywhere, and even in the time of peace, they're the furthest removed, right? You can't even fuck with water. They're just like these Inuit-esque populations that are,
even like the swamp benders that are just still out there in the Earth Kingdom.
Right, yeah, and people don't even know about them, right? Because they're
I really do love that representation of the poles, because it's also these are like the two gravitational poles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really in terms of the what water bending is and how it applies, it represents the martial art Tai Chi, that use of gravity, that feeling of gravity translates to how water moves. I think that's really fucking cool.
Word. Earth, right? I don't know if somebody else wants to tag in.
I'll tag in. I think Toph is Toph and Boomy are probably my two favorite representations of Earth. I think Boomy is very unwavering mentally. Boomy is always, he's where he may seem to be a crazy person, right? King Boomy, in his weird metaphors and the weird things he does to Aang when he first meets him, or the strange way he approaches taking back Omashu by waiting for the solar eclipse, is that he's unwavering in his philosophy. He knows exactly what's going to get him where he wants to be, and he goes through with that. And I think that's symbolic for earthbending, and they do this, and I think they do the same thing with Toph. Toph is a very unwavering individual. She's very headstrong. She's very stubborn. I think one of my favorite scenes is when she's teaching Aang to earthbend and guitar. You're going too hard on him, and Toph says to her, "No, I have to keep doing what I'm doing, or he'll never learn how to earthbend, because he's not like me. He's not unwavering in his resolve." And I think that is something that earthbenders, or at least the two Toph and Boomy, have mastered, is to become unwavering in their principles and their resolve.
Well, clearly, Boomy is a very highly revered bender. He's like crazy old, right? How is
Been out
he
here
for
for years,
long,
right?
And he's that strong, right? And he's also a part of the White Lotus, right? This, a part of an order that represents an underlying understanding of the intrinsic nature of all the elements, right?
Mhm.
And how they, they're all intertwined. They all, are, you know, just it's all part of the spectrum, right? And so,
It's a dial.
Yeah, they're all balanced out of
If I can
each
add
other.
on something interesting about Boomy in that regard is that all of the things that appear to be riddles is actually just Boomy talking really straight.
Right.
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 He's not giving them riddles; they're overthinking it.
Mhm.
Right.
And I think that's a cool way, as you mentioned, to represent Earth in a different way than the typical Toph-like stubbornness.
Right.
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 Well, and Toph will always tell you like it is,
Right. In a whole different way, though.
to be very honest, right? Yeah.
In a whole different way, she'll shoot straight to the point, right? And what did we have still?
We have air and water to go over. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Katara is a great representation of water.
Mhm.
I think how motherly she is. How giving and also receiving she is such a great representation of water. I think I don't know someone else pick up, but I before I gush too much about how much I like Katara's character.
Well, then I think it's you're I think you're onto something, right? Is that she's in this constant state of nurturing and being relatively calm, but when she's not right, and she
Right.
becomes very volatile and dangerous. And she's the only one that can change Toph.
Right.
Is a really cool
Yeah.
addition, I think, that they kind of put in, right? And the idea that like nothing will,
Balance each other.
as I said before, nothing weathers stone like water does.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
And
It's soil.
and she does it by getting hard with Toph that one time,
Mhm.
right? Like she
Yeah.
just like by switching modes, she does, she
Mhm.
is able to weather the rock because
Right, like we said before, like the water has its different forms. Ice, water,
well,
and
I could take 100 years
Mhm.
and make a really smooth stone at the bottom of this river, or I can shoot a jet of water and
Mhm.
cut through most things.
Right.
Right. So I think that's a cool thing they did there. And air.
Yeah, air. I really feel represents this ultimate passivity, right? I mean, it just think about air, right? It's that the one thing that we need to have connection to be living, right?
Mhm.
As soon as our connection to air gets cut off,
It's all.
we start to die. We can last a couple days without food, a couple more days without water, but or vice versa.
So, yeah.
Yeah, flip
Yeah.
that, sorry.
Flow.
But and I think that it's like we were talking about before, Ben, how air represents just this quality, this ever pervading awareness, right? And you see that with the airbenders, a reverence to the monistic life. Yeah, if anyone wants to tag in, but I just think that
I think air is a very it's an element that needs someone to be free, not unhinged, but at least open, right?
right.
Like I said earlier, I think air's the element that can get from A to B in so many different ways that someone that does airbend, in order to, I think, master the element, would have to think about all the different options, all the different pathways. So it naturally would take a level of being open. I think that's what Aang does represent to a certain extent, right? Although he, does seem to have one path of getting, to Sozin's comet to, beat the Fire Lord, he still goes about it in such a way where he's taking, whatever path comes to him, right? Or he can find any,
I think you raised a good point, Sam, by starting off with the idea that air is the fundamental for living, right? In that the show begins with, well, it doesn't begin with, right? I mean, for a long time, this war is unsustainable, right? It's an insane idea on the part of the Fire Nation, and the White Lotus, who kind of represent the moral compass of a unified four nations,
Right.
balance, right, between the elements and everything, you know, in both in the literal and figurative sense. They see the extermination of the air nomads as the beginning of the end, right? It's not, you know, it's like that. It's an unforgivable offense to exterminate a group of people, let alone one, you know, the people who do one of the four things that are fundamental for fucking what we do as a society. And I think it was symbolic of the show, of all things, for the Fire Nation to have done it, because you can't have fire without oxygen.
Right.
Right.
They're snuffing themselves out.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. In the long run, and that's the whole point of the White Lotus as its moral, you know, from its moral standpoint, right? It's unsustainable. You can't do this forever, especially.
Right, and I think that goes back to like the Fire Nation's philosophy on like fire bending being about rage and hate. That is unsustainable, right?
Right.
I think this is a good segue to sort of think about how I think, you know, whoever really, I'm sure it was probably a team of people, but whoever came up with the way these elements in Avatar represent these human traits and emotional qualities we have. How they apply, they really did a good job of diagnosing. Really, I mean, I hate to break it to certain types of people, but you know, the way we can act if we have these affinities towards, you know, certain actions. I mean, really, the Fire Nation represents the most oppressive qualities of human nature. The want to divide and conquer. This you know, through hate, this need to cause a divisiveness even within your own country, and we've certainly seen that with this last presidential, our last president, and I mean this is a quality of the colonizing mindset. To me, I see the Fire Nation just representing any form of colonialism, and this
Imperialism.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think Zuko is such a good
representation of all of that, right? He's the child of a war he doesn't understand, that he feels he has to eventually pick up for his nation and for his name and all this other stuff. And it turns out that all that rage has nothing to do with anybody but his dad, right? Like,
that's the pit of it.
There's no, he couldn't tell you what the air nomads did to get exterminated. He couldn't tell you why everyone else should get exterminated. He doesn't even believe in any of that shit. He didn't even get kicked out for wanting to stop the war, right? He's like that lost in the sauce. He just didn't want, I almost said, Americans to die. You know what I mean? He just didn't want Fire Nation soldiers to die. And you know, because he's trying to be a good Fire Nation leader. And then eventually, you know, Iroh's sitting here telling him the whole time that like the Fire Nation is not an independent thing like they're making it out to be. And you know, that the rage is not the source of your power. It's actually the source of all your weaknesses. Which, if you've ever dealt with somebody who's really emotionally damaged, it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Makes sense.
You know, and it's through, again, it's through being able to recognize the source of his anger and then channel that Zuko and the Fire Nation as a whole are able to correct themselves, right? the Fire Nation is 100 years deep in a war directed at nobody. But it's also directed at everybody. Right? There's nobody alive at that point who knows what the fuck they're doing. But they're doing it.
Well, it was all a giant power grab, right?
Right.
You know? So, you know.
And Zuko's kind of like the yin and yang with the Aang in that regard. Then.
Of course.
You know, the clear, you know, the evil one discovering the, you know, the fire.
Well, that's where
the fire one discovering like the air in him, and then the air.
Right. Exactly.
Aang kind of like afraid of the fire that's in him.
Right.
The whole time he's like, I can't.
Well,
because he didn't want to damage the people he loved.
Their stories kind of parallel.
The same way, right? Zuko was afraid of getting soft because then he wouldn't be strong anymore, right? It's like comedians and shit, right? If I fix myself, I'm not funny.
Yeah.
I mean,
right. Zuko knew his duty, you know, which Aang kind of didn't want to. Aang didn't want to be the Avatar. Zuko wanted to find the Avatar. To a point that it destroyed him, right? Or you know, it got him exiled completely.
Yeah.
Past banishment.
Real shit.
Right. It was I mean, like that really represents it. You know, I think psychologically what, you know, how our neuroses are like fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
They cause us to go down these really destructive pathways, and it does. The more we're affected by it, the more we start thinking about it, the more we give weight to it, the more it grows like a fire. It is really destructive. And I can certainly say that I have gone down so many rabbit holes in my head that was not only just a waste of time, I may have done some damage to myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is a tendency that we have as humans. You know, we tend to ruminate on things when we're so or we're so obsessed with something, right? And Zuko is so obsessed, and Iroh is really one of the most compassionate, you know, people in that universe. He is constantly trying to align Zuko, and he's always looking out for him. And it represents I mean, to me, it just shows the mastery over oneself that we're all meant to achieve. You know, we all have these affinities towards elements, but Iroh really mastered his fire, his inner fire, and that's it. I just say Iroh is such an amazing character.
Right. Well, and I think to your point, Iroh is where the Fire Nation needs to be already, right? Iroh is where Zuko needs to be, and
in a utopian world,
right.
Iroh, people like Iroh would have been the Fire Lord.
Right. And contrary to the Fire Nation and Zuko's belief in the show, Iroh will spank all of them in Firebend. Right. Like, it has nothing to do with him being angry.
Yeah, he didn't want to fight the Fire Lord. He knew it wouldn't solve anything.
Right. It had nothing to do with him being angry. It has something to do with him being focused or whatever it might be, passionate and driven and a firebender.
My all-time favorite quote comes from the very first episode. I can't even name. It's not even really. It's not my favorite quote, but it's my favorite instance of for our first glimpse of Iroh, or one of our first glimpses of Iroh is him. Is Iroh teaching Zuko, firebending, right? And trying to tell him that he's being too physical, right? That he needs to focus more on his internal work. You know, with power, that power from firebending comes from the breath.
Right.
That is. I mean, that's why I love this show. As soon as I heard that, I was sort of just like, okay, like this is great, because that is, representative of martial discipline, right? That you're trying to put all this forceful energy into your body and trying to muscle your way through it. I mean, certainly you need physical strength, but really, it's being connected to your breath and then moving in accordance with that. that allows you to really develop. You understand the natural movement of your body. You unlock so much stuff just from doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, to me the only one that's blatantly obvious in terms of its mirrored application to understanding excuse me martial arts, it seems easy to understand firebending, right? If it's about dynamic energy, large movements with the body, but really you have to do the research to see what other aspects of that the elements have, right? And so I guess what I'd like to hear from you guys is what do you take from the elements? Like where do you see the representation of the elements, like in the real world? What do you think they were trying to mirror and describe with say like water, earth, and air?
Well, I think I'll just go off. I'll piggyback on what you were saying about fire just for a moment. I like to think that fire is mainly about self-control. Like you were saying with these emotions or these lines of thought that can burn scars into your psyche. It's about having this level of self-control of when to turn that off, when to say that's too much.
Right.
Like with was it Master Zhang with Aang and the leaf, when he's talking about breath and not the emotion and the focus you put into fire, and he goes over it's all about control, just keeping that ember going and that leaf going. And they do this with the when they're going up the hill to meet the dragons. It's all about keeping that steady control of your flame. So to me, fire really the kind of the lesson you can learn through firebending is of self-control.
Right. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with being able to control fire.
Yeah.
Right. And it's inherently the most destructive of the elements, right?
Right.
Like,
yes.
That's what we're talking about with Aaron. I remember that on that episode when it was like how fire is represented as like the destructive element and everything.
Right.
But we don't see that it also is like the element of like changing something.
Right.
It's also that.
It's a catalyst.
It's a catalyst.
It's
all about how
it's necessary
it gets
to
used.
tear down.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
That's the thing.
Well, I think the only thing that makes and this is like something that comes up in it doesn't come up in the show, but like it's there, and it's what the live action film really screwed up is the idea that firebenders needed a different source of fire, right? What makes fire more destructive than the other elements is that it itself destroys things, right? Like the earthbenders, you put them on the fucking metal thing and they're screwed. They need a rock around to do something. The waterbenders need to be by water to do something, and then airbenders can airbend without anything else, but the air isn't going to destroy you like fire is going to destroy you, right? Like, and so there's something inherently dangerous about fire and being able to fire bend.
Right. It comes from you. Yeah.
Right. It comes right from your hand, and then it speaks to, again, like to your point, Ben, self-control. The extra responsibility that the Fire Nation has in not doing exactly what it wanted them doing. Right. Like Ben Parker says.
A lot of great responsibility.
Right.
Great power.
Now, water, right, is like the clear. I think water is the most well understood, right? It's the easiest to see and understand and everything else, and right, go with the flow,
right?
But you don't have to, right? You can also cause great change with water, and there's a power to that versatility.
Right, the ability to be in like constant change and constant motion.
There's a level of balance that you actually have from that.
Right.
Because it's a certain kind of balance that you can be fine with your life changing.
Right, or to move through states of hot and cold.
Right.
Right. Well, it can be so hot it burns you. It can be moving so fast it cuts through something. It can be
Right, so cold it slows
so,
stuff down.
So
right?
cold, right. It can be so cold you slip and crack your head on it.
Right.
You know, like it can do what it needs to do, given the circumstance, and that's the appeal of being like water, right?
And it's cohesive. It's holding itself together. I think,
Right. That's true too. Yeah.
Water is a good way of symbolizing like the binding that that I think one would inhabit if they were to be like a master waterbender or such, or one that inhabits the.
Well, it's not water. I mean, we do actually get our sense of balance from fluid in our ears, right?
Yeah.
Like there's all sorts of things going on there. Air is tricky. I think that's why they killed him off.
It's hard to represent him. Yeah.
Yeah, like
That's funny.
it's just
Like I feel like there could be so many different kinds of airbenders.
yeah, like the idea that somehow they all agreed to be monks. I don't buy.
It's Fire Nation propaganda.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, no, that is a good point. But I think this is the part of Avatar I actually don't like, is that these different bending styles are also somewhat attributed to ethnicity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really disagree with that. I think that this is these are qualities of different types of people that we see in all different parts of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are the representations of human characteristics and human flaws and human ideals, and so I certainly I can only buy all airbenders are monistics if they choose, if all airbenders I feel the affinity to go choose that lifestyle, right? Only then does that make sense. And so I see that, so I guess maybe it's just from a need to not expand it the universe that much, that it's the different types of bendings aren't broken up like this. It sort of needs to it's a show for kids. It definitely does need to maintain a certain level of simplicity.
Right. Well, and I think sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Go ahead.
They address that, I think, through Iroh's teachings and the White Lotus's teachings.
100%.
Right? They address the idea that
Guru Patik.
Right. The idea that these elements, despite all of these characterizations that we give them, are totally separate from your human behavior.
Right.
You're a firebender because you were born in the Fire Nation. You're not angry because you're a firebender. You're not a firebender because you're angry. And there's angry people in the Water Nation,
right?
And water tribes, rather, shit like that, where it's like, I think, to your point, it is weird that they do that from a outside perspective, but to your point, it's a children's show, and
I think it also kind of comes from the nations being as segmented as they were at the time. Because there still are swamp benders that look like earth benders, right, that live in the Earth Nation, and there's still there's the what are they called, the Sun Warriors? Is that what they're called? The people that they meet the dragons with,
right? Yeah.
Because they don't look like traditional.
No, yeah, they
Fire
almost represent like a Aztec,
right?
Yeah,
they got like weird little on the nose there,
right? But they're still firebenders, right?
Right, yeah, definitely. And I think that it speaks to, in a weird way, it gives depth to the idea that we're all the same. That you still get something based on your genetics, right? You still do get firebending. Like, there's things that do make us different.
No, you're right.
None of the important shit, right?
You're absolutely right. And that's why I brought up with the idea of the Fire Nation representing the imperialists, because that really is and I certainly think of capitalism, as like a pretty fiery element. You know what I mean? It's certainly, just in terms of my personal scope, I see it as being a source of a lot of destruction in the world. And how we have so much discord and disharmony right now, and it seems like this fiery, chaotic energy that has come from an overdeveloped world.
Well, and the
the main criticism of capitalism from Marxism, right, is the idea that it's
unkept. It's not in control.
Like one, it can when it runs out of control, we get problems, and
Right.
two, it is fueled on something,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's
Right.
fuel. It's burning something up, and that's the
Yeah.
labor and well-being of the proletariat, right? Or whoever, right? Slaves in
Right.
some instances, whoever, whatever. It's eating something up to be there still, and to speak to capitalism or imperialism or whatever else. It needs a fuel, despite and which is different than shooting it from their hands, but whatever.
Of course, yeah. But it's just great the way that they animate the show, because I think this is of animators in general, but it's really special to capture an emotional or something that's supposed to be an emotional representation of something, and they really do such a good job with that.
Yeah.
It allows you to enjoy the show, at all different stages of life. You can enjoy it as its most simplistic view from when you're a child. You can enjoy it through teenage years, and you can enjoy it as an adult. Everybody. But so I guess sort of wind things up. What do you guys think is the overall central theme of the story? There's a lot to take into account with the universe. There's so many ways you can think about it, but what do you think is the message of specifically Aang's journey? Not what Aang went through himself, but what it represents, as in an allegorical way. And Manny, you've seen it the most recently.
I am the most recent. Realize your abilities, master them the best you can, and do all the parts of how to master them. And like his lesson, to kind of like how all the elders in the Fire Nation were trying to teach you have to learn to control your fire. It's kind of like from the flip side of Aang, learn to use your fire with control. You're never out of control.
Right.
So like learn how to use it, when to use it, and how to control it, because then you're even higher than all the elements. And you control them all to some degree.
I think one of the themes that I think is the strongest is balance. Like we were talking about with Aang and Zuko, they both learn to balance, both their responsibility, what they feel is their responsibility with, Zuko in the third and fourth season kind of becomes a more playful person. He goes on a date with some Earth Kingdom girl. He's making, weird jokes with Aang's gang at the end. Right, yeah, and, so I think, like, he becomes more like Aang, and where Aang then becomes more like Zuko, more determined, more ready to fight the Fire Lord, to step up to his responsibilities. So I think balance is definitely one of the biggest themes for me throughout the show, as well as becoming growing up.
Right.
Everyone grows
Of
up
course,
in the show.
Yeah.
It
is definitely a coming of age.
It's really
story.
good for that. Yeah. Through so many ways.
I think, like balance and well-roundedness. I think in its I like to do this where I just be like, no, that's a romance, right? Like Star Wars is a love story, just like fucking Avatar is a love story. You know what I mean? Like it
does end,
because say what you will, he only really does it for Katara, right? Like he's 12, son. Like he knows, like he knows.
I wouldn't say he only does.
He doesn't only do it, of course, but like
that seems.
But in that last scene, right? They're like, here's Zuko and the Avatar, and then it shows everybody, and then it shows Aang, and then it just shows Katara, and then it zooms back out to the crowd, right? Because Aang was up there being congratulated by the world, looking at Katara. You know what I mean? Like
connected it.
I think Katara represents his drive for compassion. I think. I mean, To your point, I absolutely think that, had Katara's presence not been there, he could have really been a little bit more of a, you know what, I'm just gonna fucking kill the Fire Lord. You know what I mean?
I'm just gonna kill him.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna keep running.
Right.
I think that's a lesson the show wants you to have, because with Guru Patik, telling him, you gotta get rid of Katara and all your friends and let go of them to, control the Avatar state, but Aang does it anyway in the finale.
Yeah.
He does get, kind of knocked around by the Fire Lord, and maybe that is why he enters the Avatar state. But regardless, he does
He
it.
wasn't supposed to do whatever again.
Yeah.
That's the Guru warned him, and he was like, that's the chip on the shoulder.
He also he completely charters his own path as well. He has these teachers that he can rely on, but ultimately it's him drawing it forward, right? So he has to listen to his own intuition,
right? Which again, but speaks to the balance thing, and well, I'm halfway joking about it being a romance thing, right? To Ben's point, that's something that Aang has to balance too, right? Is this whole his love for Katara and everything, and I think that's like a major fueling point for everything, he practices harder when she's around and shit like that, you know what I mean? Like I think which is just good storytelling, you know what I mean?
Right.
He does a good job of slowly
Absolutely.
building that relationship up.
I-
and then
I-
to Festo's point of it's about finding what you want.
Right.
Right? Find what you're good at, find what you want, and work for it. And
alignment.
right. And that's kind of the thing, right? Is that and he keeps going, yo, like they want me to do this and this and this, but I just want Katara.
Right. Yeah.
That's all I'm thinking.
Like that's all I want right now. And they're like, oh, but you got to do this instead. And he's like, but can't I have both? And they're like, nah. Like it's
Tell him
like,
yeah. And he'll be out.
which is just like Star Wars,
Just saying.
Fucking greatest love story ever told.
Hey,
Well, like you said, do what you want. That's one of my favorite characters in the show. Sokka is always trying to do what he wants to do, and never doesn't know what he wants to do. But it's just, he's clumsy. He's kind of dumb, but he's getting there.
Right.
He's got to follow the Avatar. He's got to help the Avatar. He's kind of second hand to doing that. But then he finds a master, and learns and kind of. That's how he transforms himself, right? I mean, Sokka has a lot of growth throughout the show, but he gets a master. He gets not acceptance, but he gets a lot of admiration from his father too, which is one of the things he always wanted.
Well, and by Endgame, it's a team of 5, right? And there's 4 benders and just him, and the other benders have a dichotomy, right? There's Zuko, Aang, and there's Katara, Toph,
right?
And Sokka not only acknowledges he's like, I don't feel like I contribute, right? Like how could I feel like I do shit? You guys shoot fire and everything, but they're like, no, you do like the most, right? And I think that's really cool because he doesn't have somebody to be growing off of the whole time like the other ones do, and then he's consciously trying to embody them the whole time, and as a result is, like you said, makes this tremendous transformation without any of the shit like other people do. Like I remember, like people honestly complain. I've heard it where they're like, Sokka is just like good all of a sudden. It's like, no, you just didn't like acknowledge that there's a character growing here, right?
Exactly.
He's just been swinging a boomerang for the last few
Right.
seasons for a reason,
What I really like about some of the philosophical elements that this show represents is that people always have like a misconception of what what the prophet is supposed to be and act like, right? Like Aang is the savior of the earth, right? So I think he's in a lot of ways mirrors the way we revere prophets, right? But the people who give him, so he has to listen to all these people. Oh, I have to become this and this and this. But all these people who are telling him this have no idea what it is like to be the Avatar.
Right.
The people who he really gets guidance and wisdom from is the previous avatars, and that there's this idea that in order to achieve realization or enlightenment or whatever, you have to retreat from the world, and that's somewhat of an unfortunate and limiting perspective, because even if you retreat from the world, you're still a part of it. Like, there is no leaving the world, right? There is no. I mean, you can leave society as a greater whole, but you're still human, right? You're still part of the community, even if you're in isolation. And I think Aang represents that really well. He gives into his human side, right? He it's not even that he gives into it. He's human. Right. The avatar is human.
Right.
And he wants to live his life. He has wants, he has desires, he has things that he wants to do to make him happy. But the perception is like, oh no, he should be happy serving everybody.
Right.
Right?
Well, and the previous airbending avatar, when he's asking the avatars what he should do about killing the Fire Lord, he goes, but like we're monks. We don't kill people. She goes, we're not just monks, we're the avatar. We don't get that privilege of just retreating from the world and doing X, Y, and Z and being pacifists, right? You don't get that privilege. And I think, as somebody who's always been interested in spiritual pursuits, I can't say that, it's not that I don't get that privilege, right? I could totally, like anybody, go find some monastery somewhere and hopefully they accept me, or even just go live in the woods, right? You could do it.
There's plenty of places you can go these days that'll accept you.
Right. You could do it, but like, I would rather balance the two, right? I want to balance the two, like Aang does. I want to balance the two,
right?
And it's cool that the monk, the previous avatar, I forget her name, but she doesn't say, so go ahead and balance it, right? She says you have to balance it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? You have to balance it. There's no, you don't get to choose this other path. And
I mean, Aang is told many times. I mean, like you say you want to achieve spiritual enlightenment and stuff like that, and be a monk. I'm sorry, that's not gonna happen, dude.
Right.
It's not in the cards for you because you're the avatar.
Right.
Like, you have a responsibility.
Maybe you do this first, then you get to do that, but you definitely don't get to do that now.
And that really, to me, mirrors. I mean, at least in the origins of Shakyamuni Buddha, right? At first, when the Buddha achieves enlightenment, he thinks to himself, "I'm going to teach this to nobody. There's no possible way to integrate this with the rest of the world. It's not a thing that can be done." And then, in some instances, it's after he gives his first sermon to deer that he has this realization that he can teach other people. I think in some other instances, it's a bodhisattva coming down and telling him, you're meant to be the teacher of the world or whatever. But he comes through, he's like, no, that's foolish to think that I would be separate from the world forever. It's like, this is a responsibility that I now have to teach.
Right.
And that to me represents the avatar. I have a responsibility to mankind to serve.
And I think it speaks to a certain level of sort of what this podcast is trying to get at, right? Is that all of this stuff is not mystical mumbo jumbo.
Exactly.
It's right
It's
here.
very
It's-
real.
It's right here,
Yeah.
and it doesn't make you better than somebody
No.
else because you do
No.
it, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't yoga and crystal and sage your way into being better than other people.
That's not the point.
Damn, I got a lot of crystals to throw out now.
It can make you a better person, but just doing it doesn't make you
Well,
better.
it's just
right?
it's like, what does being a better person mean?
Right.
Me,
Yeah,
right, right.
It's-
What
it's-
does that
it-
mean?
I think the best way to do it is and we were even saying this earlier with Derek, Manny, is that your experience is for somebody else. You shouldn't think of as stuff you're doing for yourself to build yourself up, right? You do this so that you can oh, maybe you're not going to be so angry in that next argument with your friend because that's your fucking friend.
Mhm.
Why are you arguing with him?
Right.
That's the reason why you have a practice.
Right.
You don't develop a practice. I mean, or because this is too much, man. Like I really need to calm myself down. That's another good reason.
Right.
It's a wrong reason to build your ego up.
Right. To build
Around
my
it.
ego
And
and
unfortunately, you see so many people do that.
to expel the haters and whatever the fuck people are driven by. And to the point, right, that before Aang can define what he wants, he can't do anything. Right? He's just spinning his wheels. He's trying to get other people to tell him what he wants, and while when people are telling him what he wants, he doesn't want to hear it. All sorts of shit like
Right.
I think it goes back to the idea of balance, right? You balance your responsibilities, you balance your spiritual well-being, you balance the aspects of your personality.
Right.
And
one of my favorite things about the show is that one of the musical motifs they always use is it's the song that Iroh plays on the Sunji horn,
Right.
and it's about the 4 seasons, and the balance that they bring to the world. So to just to piggyback off that, I think that's such like just a strong theme throughout the show.
Right.